Hello, and welcome back to E.G. the Virgo. We're going to continue on now, and finally, we can get through to the next chapter again, but we want to first go through our normal routine of not infringing upon anyone's copyrights or anything of that nature. So, without further ado, this is an unusual kind, that 1%, based on actual experiences and theories. This story includes entertaining fictional and non-fictional images, animations, videos, and music by artists and photographers unrelated and in no way were created for this particular story or documentary. Some names, dates, and times were changed to protect the privacy and identities of the characters within the story. This, of course, is still a part of Volume 1 of One Life, Five Generations. So, without further ado, let's go on to the next step. In our copyright disclaimer, under Section 107 of the Copyright Act 1976, allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research. Fair use is a use permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing. Nonprofit or educational or personal use tips the balance in favor of fair use. Source of this copyright disclaimer can be found at Circular 92, Copyright Law of the U.S., 17 U.S.C., Section 107. And now we're getting right into Chapter 5, E's First Guy Friend. After such a horrendous ordeal, a couple of weeks back at the construction site, if you all remember in Chapter 4, and trying to hang out and keep up with her brother and his friend, E decided it may be best to wait and play with some of her own friends right in front of her apartment building and safely within the community. One early, bright summer morning, after eating a delicious bowl of cereal for breakfast, while E was sitting on the front steps of her apartment building, waiting for her friends to come outside to play, quietly playing alone with her toy dishes, pots, and pans, making mud pies and make-believe vegetables out of grass, E momentarily looked up from playing to see if she could see any of her friends coming outside to play, but instead, E noticed another little kid was slowly and shyly walking towards her, coming from another apartment building within her complex. As E watched this other kid slowly walk over towards her direction, she realized she had never seen this kid before in her apartment complex. As the little kid got closer, E could see this kid looked to be about the same age as her, but a wee bit shorter than her in height. When the little kid stopped in front of E, the kid asked E what her name was. E gave the little kid her name and asked them the same question. The little kid said his name was Gregory. Strangely, he had the same name as E's future husband would turn out to have 21 years later. Gregory was a little shy and slightly chunky, cute little kid who was very nice and new to the community. He wanted to make new friends as he didn't know anyone, and E was the first little kid he saw that he, may be around his age and may be a nice person to be friends with. Gregory then asked E her age, and E told him she was 5. E then asked Gregory the same, and he said he was 5 too. there would also be a 5-year age difference between E's future husband and herself 21 years later. Gregory then asked E what she was making in her pots and pans. Well, E told him she was making pies and vegetables out of mud and grass, and then asked if he would like to sit down and have a plate of food with her. Gregory laughed in disbelief because he was wondering if E was for real or not. E told Gregory it's only make pretend and not to try to eat the food for real. Gregory let out a sigh of relief. Oh boy. He then sat on the steps with E and began pretending her food was delicious and that he was eating it with her toy fork and butter knife from her toy plate. As the two continued playing, Gregory realized E was a pretty little girl and asked if they could pretend the front steps was their house together and it's where they sit to eat and have dinner. E looked at Gregory with an unusual expression, where he might be going with that question, and said a quick and friendly, okay. While they continued pretending to eat, Gregory looked at E and said he thought she was pretty. E didn't know how to respond to that comment, so she just looked at Gregory, smiled, and continued to pretend eating. Then E stopped pretending to eat and began staring back at Gregory to see if she thought he was cute too. Then E told Gregory he was too. And then they both innocently looked at each other and laughed together at such notions and happily continued eating their make-pretend meal. Soon after, one of E's other best friends finally came out to play and happily and quickly joined in with E and Gregory, pretending to cook and eat. After some time had gone by, we're talking about a few weeks now, some of the older preteens and teens would playfully tease E and Gregory by chanting they were girlfriend and boyfriend and that they were going to grow up and marry each other one day. But E and Gregory never paid any mind to the older kids and would just always happily continue playing whatever they were playing at the time. For the next 3 years, the little trio were inseparable, like 3 peas in a pod. They played with one another each day, every chance they had, until it was time for E's family and her best friend's family to move away to other cities. Gregory's family would soon follow and move out of the old neighborhood too, about a year later. As time would go on, E only saw her best friend one other time in her life, and that was after they reached their teen years, shopping at their state's biggest shopping mall. The two were so excited and surprised to see one another after so many years apart. They complimented one another on their appearances, quickly caught up, with each other on what was going on within their little teen lives, hugged each other goodbye, and parted ways. But strange enough, E never saw or even happened to run into Gregory ever again. We got to think about what those chances are of E meeting someone, the first guy, and his name has the first name as, supposedly her future husband. And the fact that they both are 5, and that the future husband and her are gonna have a 5 year difference. You know, you always gotta wonder in that 1%. Sometime you have to look at so that is one of the things that, I was looking at. And that's some of the things we got to think about when we're going through these chapters. And they sound pretty innocent, but, it's kind of like your life. You might reminisce on something and it sounds pretty innocent to you. But think about it. Is it really as innocent as we perceive it? Like, it is innocent. It's still innocent. But what are we missing here? Did we ever think, okay, we were E and Gregory, did we ever think that, okay, that they both 5 years old when they first met, and that, she was probably the first little girl he thought was cute, and she was probably the first little guy that she thought was cute, and because, really, they're just coming out of toddler stage. I always say toddler stage stops at 4 years old. Well, they were just 5. So, they were just getting in, hey, how, 5 year olds look at each other like, you look like something, and they become friends and everything. But you never realize that maybe that person may have traits or characteristic, behavior or personality like someone that you're going to meet far up in the future. And that's like, we don't even realize how our lives are showing us that it's already written. God has showed them, and we just never took the time to look at it. And I guarantee you, if you look back at some of the things, if you can remember or recollect some of your childhood, interactions and childhood games and things you might have done, it might be some things that you have done in your childhood that would have led up to or would have helped you perceive what was going to go on later on, in life. Because I believe that you're always forewarned, but we just never pay attention. We have to pay attention. We need to pay attention to the things we're doing and certain things that stands out. But in any sense, who knew that playing make pretend with play toys and dishes? We've all probably done it in our lives. Played make pretend with our toy dishes and things and used grass and mud. We never thought those things would stand out, but it wasn't those things that actually made the difference. But actually, it almost does, because if she married someone named Gregory, presumably later in her life, well, she does have to cook with them, for her family or whatever, or for him or whatever, and he has to cook for her, and they eat each other's food. All those little settled things. Isn't that something? And then you have, the age, okay, they're both 5. Isn't that and then later on, allegedly, the person she's supposed to marry is going to be a 5 year difference between them in their age, and then this person's name is going to be Gregory, just like the person she first met as the first little guy friend she met in her life. I'm not talking about like her brother's friends or something. I'm talking about her little friends, her little, little circle, and her little friend that the older kids were teasing, teasing them about them being husband and wife later on in life, and that they were girlfriend and boyfriend, and they were kids. They didn't even pay attention to the older kids. They kept right on doing what they were doing because they were innocent little kids. They wasn't even thinking about that. But imagine that she allegedly would never see this kid again named Gregory, as if he just came in just to make himself known, just to put that little piece out there, those couple of pieces out there for what was going to go on with her in the future, and then boom, disappears. He's gone. They never see each other again. But uncannily, she does run into her best friend, the little girl. She does run into her again. So she runs into her at a local shopping center when they're teenagers. So, and of course they catch up on it, but she never runs into this guy, Gregory. Now, Gregory, may have moved completely out of the state or just so far away from them that they never cross paths again. And maybe it wasn't meant to. Maybe he was just put there as, life's destiny. He was put there just to say, hey, you're going to have a husband in the future with the same name as me. And the fact that we're five, both of us are 5 years old, you're going to have a 5-year difference in the future when you get married. I mean, doesn't that sound kind of eerie? That's some eerie stuff if you think about it, you probably been like, wow, I wish I had paid attention sooner, because this is something. So that's really why this story made it into this story here, this documentary story, as that 10%, an unusual kind, because there is something unusual about the stories and situations in here, as you can see. But let us move forward. And as we do move forward, we see that we have now come to the end of chapter 5, which we're going to wrap up pretty quick. And that's great because it's only been about 16 minutes or so. E's first guy friend. We're coming to the end of that, and I hope that you all understood it. And I felt it was necessary to narrate that at the end, because at the end, everybody could be wondering, now, what did that have to do anything? What was so unusual about that, But there you go. You saw what I pointed out. And then think about your own lives. Some things may have occurred in your own lives that you don't realize, little tiny little pieces. It's like a puzzle, like a serious jigsaw puzzle that you have to put together. Or sometimes some of the pieces aren't so hard. It stands right out, but we don't pay attention to it. We didn't realize that the little girl named E at the age of 5 was going to meet her first little guy friend, and he was going to be 5, and his name was going to be Gregory, and it was going to be supposedly he's the same name, has the same first name as her her future husband. And also they're going to be 5 years apart, but these two were 5 years old, but 5 years. Her husband and her are supposed to be 5 years apart in age, So this is why this particular situation made it into this documentary story of an unusual kind, that 1%. So if you all can think about that, and until next time, we'll be doing chapter 6, which will be the power of a child's wish. God hears them. So chapter 6 is going to be good. But as I said, in between my chapters, you will find some political postings. So I hope you enjoy some of them updates. But they're just, things that you should already know. You should already, because my political postings, by the time I put them up, you people, most of the viewers, you guys should already know what's going on. But again, until then, you all have a blessed day, and I hope you all will come around for chapter 6. It takes so long to get these chapters out, but I apologize. I get them out there as fast as I possibly can, so I hope you all join in again. And until then, stay blessed.